For a long time, GCCs were wrapped in soft corporate language, efficiency, scale, capability. But the basic logic was always economic. Companies came to India because the talent was strong, deep, and more affordable than in many Western markets. That has not disappeared. It has only been dressed up. Yes, the work has become more sophisticated. Many GCCs now lead serious transformation, product, analytics, and R&D work. But this is not some moral awakening from global headquarters. It is still a commercial decision. And now AI complicates the picture even further because while GCCs are expanding today, the same organizations are also building systems that may automate parts of this workforce tomorrow. So there is a real tension here. Is India being positioned as a long-term strategic talent base or as a highly capable human bridge to an automated future? That is why I feel EVP, as in employee value proposition, matters. Not as a branding garnish, but as a test of honesty. Because Indian talent is not only asking, what is the job? They're asking, what is the future? Where is the power? And how fast can I grow? To sum it up all, what's in it for me? If GCCs cannot answer those questions in a way that feels real in India, then the global EVP will remain what it often already is, worded, well designed, and strangely hollow. Now, to help us unpack that tension, I'm joined by Smitha Hemmigae, Managing Director of ANSR, who has worked closely with organizations building and scaling GCCs in India. Smitha has seen this model evolve up close, including the promises it makes and the pressure it often avoids naming. Smitha, welcome.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me here. It's a it's a pleasure, and you've said such a interesting way in which you framed the question that it is a lot of pressure to answer this, and I feel like I'm sitting on the hot seat.
No. We're going to make this easier. I just want viewers to kind of get a bit of context. So let's do a real GCC story context, right? India's GCC story is often framed as a move towards innovation and strategic capability. How much of that shift is real and how much is simply better storytelling?
So, Brian, I've been at Answer for a little over 5 years now. And, across these 5 years, the conversations that I've had across multiple or with multiple CXOs has predominantly been around value and has not been around cost. And when we talk about value, it is talking about value that's core to their business. For example, if it's a bank, finance and accounting is core to its business. In many parts of the world, finance and accounting might be seen as a commoditized process that can be outsourced, correct? But if you transform that, if you're able to automate and then add AI and then now even agentify that process, it's core to the organization and core to what the organization looks to achieve as business that's critical to its functioning or close to its secret sauce. So in many ways, we see organizations are tech companies in the guise of whatever they do. For example, a few years back at CES, the Delta Airlines CEO said that Delta is a tech company in the guise of flying planes. And so I don't see any organization being any different from the statement that the Delta CEO made. And if you're going to be technology at the core of everything that you're doing as a business, then you need to have core capability that will help you deliver on this. And many a time, these organizations do not find that core capability in the cities or the regions that they operate in. And which then leads to where can I find this talent at scale that can transform, that can add value, that can be my force multiplier, that can truly create my version 2.0 or look at creating a better version of myself in the market, be the segment leader from just being my market leader for my service. All of that is what teams in India end up doing. And the only reason they come to India is because you get talent that is T-shaped. You've got great horizontal perspectives and, views, and you've got very deep technology depth. So that allows you to kind of look at people who've got entrepreneurial skills, who have the ability to influence, who've got a point of view and can talk to global audience, who can influence without authority, who have, who are truly know their craft really well in what they are and can be global leaders tomorrow managing teams. And that's what GCC talent is all about. That's what makes them so unique. And that's what GCCs look for when they come to India.
I'm glad you said that. Where you definitely see there's a genuine change in the last 5 to 10 years. You agree? There's been quite a lot that is going on, right? But where do you still see the old model hiding behind new language? Do you see that happen?
Cost is no more any factor because there is an arbitrage which will come in. And it's table stakes and hygiene. Nobody talks about cost. Nobody talks about a business case which talks about cost. Everyone talks about what is the tremendous value. Can I get the customer to buy something in 4 minutes instead of waiting for 42? Now, that 4 to 42 is the difference that you want to be creating. And that can be done by technology. And that can be done by our teams here in India. That's what we're talking
And
about.
I'm glad that you spoke about the introduction of agentic and AI coming into the whole economics and kind of creating tension. Look, at its core, the GCC model is still economic. That's, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm saying at its
It
core,
isn't because the world's moved from there, Brian. I mean, I've met at least 100, 120 CXOs, okay, in the last about 5 years, including a CFO who will talk about what's my savings that will come from this. Instead, they're talking about what's my top line. What can I do with customer experience? What can I do with better with loyalty? What can I do with making and creating services faster to market in line with what my customers want? How do I, build better marketing programs? How do I build a better supply chain or my back end plumbing that will help them get their products faster, better, and more optimized. So, a lot of what we're talking about, I think cost is very, very hygiene and very table stakes. It's like when you ask for a full stack engineer, you know that the individual will know how to code in Java. So, you're not going to go back and ask them, do you know Java? So it's like that because you're working with India where the salaries or the compensation is going to be much lower than in the home country, you are going to get some arbitrage. But nobody is talking about arbitrage because the teams in India are going to be building something so transformative that it's going to truly have a force multiplier effect on the parents.
I just wanted to understand now with AI entering the picture, do you see these roles as long-term strategic bets or in some cases transitional?
So it'll take time for these enterprises to, AI is going to be here and AI is here. And I don't think that's going to change any fact. It's not a blip in the industry that it's come today and it's gone tomorrow. In fact, I was talking to a leader and he gave a very interesting analogy. Just because a mathematician got access to a computer or a calculator doesn't make them redundant, right? You're still hiring them to build models because they have the context and they have the wherewithal. So will they some of this have an impact on the kind number of talent that is being the size of your team? Possibly yes, but there is no writing on the wall as yet. Will there be different job families? Possibly yes, because your team compositions are going to be different. But you cannot do away with humans, right? So you still need the human in the lead, not in the loop. So which means that you still need teams. Maybe if you had 100-member team, you might need like maybe 70 people, in the future to do it or 60 people to do it. And the rest being serviced, the volumes being serviced by agents and agents doing a lot of your rinse and repeat kind of work so that there's a lot more predictability on what you want them to do and ensuring that there's enough guardrails so that, the systems don't hallucinate. But more importantly, humans in the lead are going to be employed for context. They're not going to be hired for the ability or the capability of what you're looking to, have in the team. Like if you see today, most aptitude tests are on capability of an individual. How well can you code? And not really talking about code quality or not really talking about ability to problem solve, but a lot of the tests that we get to see or the interviews are predominantly that we've seen across the spectrum of people being hired in the technology space. It's still around the ability to code or the lines of code that you have written. And that I think will have a big change because people will not be measured on quality of code alone. They will be measured on what they bring to the table as individuals and what does that mean back to as context, having the right context so that the engines that they have
Correct.
is going to be prevalent. We're also seeing that there is three segments. There is AI for all, and that's what most organizations are thinking in terms of their thought process. There is, um, a piece that talks about, code. So, which means you're using, low code applications to kind of help you build your app, your platforms. And the last being pro code, which is everything that you need from a productivity perspective. Now, most people know that to do a lot of this, change management is going to be the biggest. So everyone's anticipating that when you're adopting AI, I don't think it is going to be on tech stack and platform and LLM or any of that. It's going to be more around, does the individual who's part of the project have the right kind of context so that you can personalize the offering to your customers or to your own employees, depending on who the end user is? Does the individual have the ability to work with in a hybrid setup where you're working with, agents as well as with your other fellow colleagues? And all of this will also mean that team compositions will change. You will have people who are predominantly, apart from domain and technology experts, they will also be prompt engineers and some of these new roles that will come by. And we don't know what the agents will need to kind of go back and fine tune them to get them to the next level. So I'm sure all of those will be what skills we will get to see. Today, a lot of work has been done in the areas of LLM, but I think true companies that have been able to differentiate when they've built platforms or tools is when you're able to contextualize it to the business and to the customers, whoever your customers are. And that is what the teams in India are doing right now in the GCC.
Very well said. I'm going to try and speak all of that you've said in one line. Is something that ex-colleague of mine said that we are currently building the plane as we fly it. So that's
It's like changing the engine on autobahn when you're driving at 120 kilometers per hour and you're trying to change the engine, take out the old engine and put a new engine back.
Do you think that there is some amount of fear within, teams? And I think the fear of, is AI going to take our jobs? Do we need to upskill and how much? And what is the investment that needs to go in, both from a company organization perspective and even from an individual perspective, right? So I'll probably bring it to answer. Do leaders speak honestly about this, without creating fear? How do you and your team of leaders work at Answer on this one?
I'll take an example of within marketing. Now, large parts of my design team uses a lot of AI tools. If you go back and look at a recent video that we posted, it was generated using a bunch of AI tools. So I can send you a link right after, and maybe you can embed it into the comments. And it was, and just because we used AI tools, did that mean that we let go of any designers? No. What we did do was think of the AI tools to be like your Iron Man suit. And you're now giving a normal person access to, an enormous amount of power. And that enormous amount of power also needs to come with responsibility. And that's going to be critical.
Can I also
And it's
accountability?
about, anybody wearing an Iron Man suit. I mean, and how can we get you the same powers as somebody in that suit to actually deliver? And there's not been a single person that we've done any displacement in the team, but we've seen AI more as an enabler. It's been an engine that's helped us get better at our craft. It's been an engine that allows us to, you know, do things better. It ensured that I could do this whole film at practically no shoot cost. So which means I didn't have to shoot a lot of fancy actors across different regions, and I did it with no cost at all. So I think some of these are what it'll give you. And it's very interesting to see what AI has in store as it continuously matures and as people adopt it mainstream. I think what's made AI a lot more interesting is engines like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude has put a lot of power back in the hands of the people like you and me. And so we've got the ability to have a Sunday experience of using it on your in your personal time. And then when you come into the Monday morning and when you're in the office, you're restricted to be using a few platforms that are going to be secure. So you've got a little jarring Monday experience. And I remember Phil First from HFS spoke about the Sunday and Monday experience in a recent conference when he was in Bangalore. And it's interesting to see how organizations see this. In fact, we saw some stats, which said there are some platforms where you've got a developer joining every second, you've got a terabyte of data, which also means that with the platforms, somebody who has limited or average coding skills also now building, you know, tools and platforms. So somebody like me still has a chance now, who never coded right after engineering, now has a chance to actually go back and code.
True. I'm glad you spoke about the when you used the word enabler. Now, look, ANSR has been an enabler for a long time. I think ANSR would be, I would call them the pioneer right in the early days. When I talk about, as an enabler, yourself, the company that you work with, ANSR, and the very many clients that you currently work with, most of them from outside of India, right? So the US or the UKs or the Australia, the Europes, and so on and so forth. Have you ever had conversations with clients internationally where we look at EVPs and we say, we need to Indianize it? When we say Indianizing an EVP, do people raise eyebrows? Like, what do you mean?
So, incidentally, my team and I work on employee value proposition or the employer brand. I also run the employer brand function globally at ANSR. And I think over the last 5 odd years, I've done, over 100 GCC setups, which also means we've been able to look at employer brand from that perspective.
Mm.
And one of the common things when people like to come and set up their operations in India, the one thing that is common across a Fortune 500, a mid-sized company, and a private equity, organization is I don't have a presence in India. Will my brand be known? Will I be able to attract? And will I be able to retain? And whenever they ask me this question, I smile because, it's not because I find it amusing, but I just find that, extremely interesting that the problem statement remains the same, irrespective of the size of the organization we're talking about. And in most cases, what we've seen is employer brand in many cases is very sacrosanct, or employee value proposition is very sacrosanct to the organization because it defines culture, it defines how they operate. It's about their you know, their ways of working and what truly defines and differentiates them compared to their peers. Because sometimes we work with multiple companies in the same segment, but each company is different to itself. And so what we do is we typically take the employee value proposition that's available globally. And I don't think any of us are really best suited to go back to change and build a brand new employee value prop for India alone. And ideally, it should not be done because this office is an extension of the home office. You should have the same EVP and it should be uniform. But in many a times, the language that they might use there may not really, you can't just shift and lift because it's not the way Indian talent respond when you're looking at certain words, certain style, because it doesn't appeal to them. So what we do is we localize it, to in line with what the hiring mandate is. So you write it in a manner that it appeals to the Indian audience without really losing the essence of what their global EVP is all about. And that's how we go back and we advise them. We've got a mature playbook in terms of going ahead with them on across multiple activities, engagement channels that helps them build awareness, attract, scale, and then sustain broadly in this market with their talent pool. And so they become more like great brand recall, or they have amazing top of mind recall in terms of their brand, and it becomes very easy to go back and hire. The best brands are brands which are culturally rooted, and they've got like, metrics that help them define that, which means low single digit attrition numbers. So, which means 2% attrition. I mean, it's unheard of in the industry. But some of our clients and well run GCCs are all in that number. And that too in year 5, year 6, when the market is hot and you've got a lot of opportunities, some of that. So the usual aspects that go into an EVP is what's unique about the organization, take some salient features from their EVP, and then add what's unique about the organization, certain accolades, revenue size if they're not known in this market. Talk about, a lot around work-life balance, because that's another area that people like to talk about, the nature of work, because the work fitment to employees are extremely critical. Talk about access to certain subject matter experts who are well known in the industry in that space that they will get as mentors to work with. Talk about, a lot of diversity or inclusion or any of those first principles that they'd like to adopt across whichever markets that they operate in, because they want to be creating a very fair and thriving workplace. Talk about some of their employee specific policies or ways of working that they have to ensure that every employee brings their full self to work and is able to truly contribute, learn, and grow in this in that environment. So a lot of this is what goes into the initial playbook. And as they come to the end of year 1, then typically there's a refresh that happens, because what got them in year 1 will not get them in year 2. So we have to relook at how can we go back and how can we work with them on year 2, and that's what we do as part of it.
But do you think global themes like purpose, flexibility, well-being, does it land differently in India? Do you feel like global, the words like global culture sometimes is what I would say just Western culture in a nicer suit?
No, so if you look at, say, Lowe's, you'll see all of them wearing their blue vest on days where, it's if they're doing a CSR activity or if there is any activity or they have a town hall, you'll see all of them wearing their blue vests or red vests. And that's in solidarity with, their advisors who are helping and working with their customers back in the stores. Or with Target, they'll wear red and khaki, because that's what people in their stores wear. And so it's taken with a lot of pride. And I remember there was a story that Lalit mentioned in one of the companies that Lalit was running early on. They'd hired a bunch of PhDs, and these were PhDs from IITs and BITS, and the ones that are highly in demand for, and they were all in the area of working on computer vision and cutting edge stuff. And when they visited their home country, the first thing that the leader, the CEO wanted them to do was actually spend a week or 10 days in the stores and in the distribution centers, in the warehouses. So they understand what it takes to actually serve your customers and create those amazing experiences, right? And we thought there'll be some resistance, but the PhD band of people that, to travel really had a great time. And so they got to appreciate the business a lot more. I don't think there's any organization where they don't take pride in the culture that that the parent has, because it's got years of history to it. There's a lot of pride that's there. And remember, they are part of the same organization. So you're not a partner, you're not an offsite, you're not an offshoot, but you're an extension. And best, run GCCs, you can't make out where the HQ ends and where the GCC begins. And so if you're doing that, and if you don't talk the same culture, if you don't talk and walk the same talk when it comes to your values and mission, I think you end up then being disconnected. And slowly you realize that that's very divisive. So in many cases, it's strongly encouraged for the center here to be exactly how the center in any other part of the world will be. So if you opened an office in San Francisco instead of Bangalore, how should that office be? So this office will be exactly like that.
I give you another example myself, a very famous company called KFC. Amazing policy. Doesn't matter how high up in the rank you join, the first week or 2 weeks, you're actually in the store behind the counter, living the life of everybody, understanding, meeting clients. And it's only then will you understand what it means to be working for a brand like that. And what you said just absolutely resonated. But now I'm going to do a bit of a twist. And you could share, you don't need to name names, okay? But I just want to understand. Can you share a moment when a global EVP didn't land in India and, you've had to sit there and say in your head, I told you so. But then they've seen
No,
the change, things have
I
happened.
think we've never had that situation, Brian, actually,
Wow.
because every time that, you know, my team and I have been on conversations with our clients, we've always gone back and advised them on why we do this, and we advise them with examples. And we show them how close it's going to be, and everything is approved. Like how if they had a communication team that's sitting within their organization, they would approve everything.
Correct.
So they have a team so instead of their own team, it's my team
Yeah.
that's working with this with the comms or the HR leader, the CHRO and their team and so on and so forth. So we've never had a situation where the suggestions that we've made have not been taken because they see you as the expert. And then it's designed as close as possible to the parent that parent feels very confident and very comfortable taking this message to market. So we've not seen an issue in whichever company that we have worked with where you just took a lift shift. I mean, like you've Indianized or you localized the EVP and it's not landed. But I do know of when I was with another service provider and in the market, there was a company that was going through a full refresh. And as part of its employer brand refresh, they just decided what worked in America, we should also work back in India as well. They used the same words and it just bombed because they just couldn't get people to connect and they were hiring truly creme de la creme from the tech industry. And it was really hard because there was no resonance and you cannot do a refresh of the EVP till about 6 months because you need data and you need to see how it's worked. And invariably, once the data came in at the end of 6 months, they clearly realized that that was not what we should have done. Then a focus group got created and they built on an existing EVP framework that was working globally, an Indian version of it, but close to the global, but more written in terms of, in a style that appeals to Indian technologists. And then they went back into the market. This time it worked. They were able to hire. That happens when people just do a lift shift instead of really
True.
thinking
True,
through us.
absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I think that, one needs to localize the EVP where you're working because we are different countries, different cultures, and all of that plays a very important role. But for people who are listening at the moment, I just wanted to understand, and maybe you can explain a little more. What does Indianizing an EVP mean? Like people over here would say, you go to work is work. What do you mean by Indianizing the EVP?
So you talk in a language that matters. So a lot of Indian talent like to understand, what's the nature of the work? Is this going to be a back office? Is this going to be a co-development center? Is it going to be, what's the impact of the work that I do? I know I'm a small jigsaw puzzle, but what does the larger puzzle look like?
Correct.
How purpose driven is the company? Does it want to contribute to the communities that it operates in? Who's the leadership team? What's the commitment from the leadership team? Who's the sponsor for this entire thing? Is there content? Is there messaging that talks of sponsorship? Because that's critical when you're going to be part of a GCC setup. Who's the leader who's going to be running the center or who are going to be part of the leadership team? What are the access of SMEs, uplearning? What's the broad principles that I've seen? How are employees truly valued globally? What does their Glassdoor tell me? A lot of this is what then gets, taken through a lens of all of these factors. And when we rewrite it could be a landing page, it could be scripts for recruiters, it can be your continuous engagement of, when you made an offer, to social campaigns, to managing organic channels or doing emails, community events or industry events, media. All of these are seen with this lens. And then content is created so that it's in line with what employees like to hear. And also, every segment of employee has a very different ask. Like, for example, a Gen Z will have a very different view from a Gen X to, a Gen Y. And we don't know how a Gen Alpha and a Gen Beta is going to be when they come into the workforce. But you also have a multi-generational workforce. So which means, how do you appeal to all of that, because you're going to be hiring from that.
I'm glad you said multi-generation workforce. So I lead the team at Let's Talk. Just about a couple of weeks ago, we published a report on how to navigate the multi-generational workforce, and I'll put the link in the comments as well. I can send you a separate email on that. Almost sounds like EVP is a promise, isn't it? For what you were saying, that what does an EVP mean? So for me, it says that EVP is a promise from the company to its employees. Let's just look at it from
It's
the
not
other.
just a promise, it's also ways of working. It's
Yes,
also about what they truly believe in. It's
correct.
about what's worked for them across the world where they have operations. So, in many ways, it's also a testament of growth.
But what do you think in GCCs? Often, while they say what they say, is there something that you feel that they consistently fail to keep? Have you seen that in
They
the market?
walk the talk because the brand and the culture is sacrosanct to these companies. It's what makes them unique. It's their secret sauce. It's like going and asking Coke for the cola recipe. It's like that. So if you go to any organization and you talk about right from onboarding to the way they engage with their people who are on their notice period to having them onboarded to after they become employees, everything is done with a very clear intention, and everything is done with a certain value, mission, purpose in mind. Nothing is done by chance and nothing has landed there by chance. So everything is done very intentionally within the GCC. So, which is why if you look at GCCs, they have a very high diversity number from a male female ratio perspective. You'll see that they are at about 30 to 35% on an average across most GCCs because they have a very intentional focus. Diversity, equity, inclusion doesn't become an afterthought. The system is designed to ensure that there is diversity and there's a focus on diversity while not compromising on quality or the bar that they're looking at for their employees. So, and a lot of this is because they are part of global organizations where these streams are already very prevalent. These are table stakes when, you're opening another office for the parent. So you cannot be, building something in isolation with a very different focus just because you're opening an office in India. And I've seen that some of these really help when you're looking at GCCs, for example. Their focus on purpose driven organizations. In fact, all of them will do something with CSR right from year one. If you look at some of the large names that come to India where they're building fairly ramping up to large teams because they feel they need to give back to this community in line with whatever is their guiding principles or their pillars that they want to be focusing on. And we've also seen that there's a lot of open communication, great culture building with parent, a lot of travel on both sides. In some cases they even have culture champions who are brought in to do transplants. They have short stints with expats, so it's called short pats, where they're here for about 3-6 months. They become two things. They help build equity for the function that they represent here, and second, they also become culture transplant experts. So they're able to bring what they see in home headquarters. And so we've seen organizations do this effectively. Like if you look at Lululemon, for example, when they came to India, remember they're coming to a land where yoga was invented. And you're a company, an athleisure company, which predominantly makes yoga pants and not yoga pants for everybody, but for a certain class in society. And how do you then go back and hire and retain talent, right? So a lot of this is based on culture, creating the right culture. They had two expats who came in from Vancouver and Seattle who were able to bring in their equity as well as, the culture that is so unique with Lululemon. We did a whole bunch of events using Sweat Life as their ways of working that allowed them to look at people who really shared fitness, working out, being healthy, as well as writing code. They found that really good intersection, and they hired a lot of them. And today they are at 2% attrition. I mean, if you look at their
Very good.
attrition numbers at the end of, year 4, year 5. And it's it's only been the case because it's a team that trains together, it's a team that runs together, it's a team that believes in sweat life, is a way they have mindfulness as a key aspect. So it's the same cultural aspects that they have back at HQ, which gets replicated here. In fact, I remember early on, they would have like the first 5 minutes, where everyone keeps silent and they're letting go of the thoughts from the previous meeting and they are letting it be. So even if you are agitated, upset with the previous meeting, you've let it be in some other place so that you don't bring that into this meeting. So there's a lot of mindfulness that goes in, and all of that doesn't happen by accident. It happens only if you're intentional about bringing and practicing and ensuring that people follow through.
That is a great one. I've never thought of that, and I think I should probably do that as a practice for all my meetings. So just keep for 5 minutes and then say, let's talk now. Um, my last question, and I promise this is going to be my last question. I always say everything boils from top down, right? EVPs, values, truths always comes from leaders. What do you think leaders should be doing, and what will become obsolete in the next 2, 3 years, knowing that there's going to be a massive generational workforce change, people going and new one coming in? What's going to be obsolete?
I think leaders should go and be willing to be putting themselves out there, either at events, forums, being part of media stories, participating in forums that truly, where their target audience exists, right? Like be visible. And that's something that I would tell all leaders is to help build their own personal brand. And that's critical because many a time when an employee is looking to search, irrespective of the generations that you have, they will search and they search the hell out of you and the company, and including the likes, dislikes, hobbies, and family and everything else of the person that they're interviewing with and the site leader. So the leader and the functional leaders play a very critical role in terms of shaping the entire capability of that center. So, building their brands are very critical. I think what might go away might be online events, and offline events will carry a lot more premium, especially as the worlds kind of come together. So, and maybe the online events will take some other format. I'm not sure what it will morph into. But the current format of what we have when we think about, online will not be there. Content in its current form will morph. So, which means content can be generated very quickly, but also can be consumed very differently. And the formats for consumption might also vary. It may not be in the traditional website, social alone. And, it might be a lot more video or comic book style, depending on, the generation of people that you're looking to go back and attract. So some of that will also vary and will change as we go along. And personalization, I think that's going to be another key thing. How can I tailor, like, how, if I'm looking at, say, a website, and if they show me everything that I like in a color that I like, and you go to the same website, but they show you what you like, I think there will be a phase in the near future where content will be written for an employee based on his or her wants
Yeah.
and interests and needing to know information about the organization. So a lot of it is going to be engine driven, and a lot of it is going to be driven by agents who can do this creatively on the fly, but within permissible limits so that there is no hallucination or there is no, going rogue in terms of what messages we're taking to market. So these are what I see will change or
Very
have
interesting you say
potential to
that.
change.
You say that. We actually do a lot of work in that, and sometimes people don't understand the thought process or the mechanics behind it. But when, for example, when we send out emails or emailers with content in it, you can actually shift the content to who's reading it. So images can change, some of the words can change, and it depends on where you are sitting or which part of the state you're sitting. The content can actually change completely.
You contextually change it, right? You personalize it based on their reading habits and their style.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But no, thank you so much. This has been great. I'm being extremely mindful. I told you first that I would try to keep it short, but looks like I've just almost touching the hour. But thank you so much. That's a wrap on today's episode, everybody, for Let's Talk the podcast, where we cut through the corporate polish, and have the honest conversations that we've been hearing. And these conversations shape the future of employer branding and talent strategy. So a huge thank you to you, Smitha Hemmigae.
Thanks for having me here. I enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah. If this conversation made you think, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, follow, and subscribe on YouTube and all of our other channels. Links are in the description below, so you will never miss an episode. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you, everybody.